Hello and welcome to the Economic Circle. In this issue, we'll be looking at sovereign debt analysis. We'll be taking a simplistic view that we use in beginners economics. For those who are familiar with macroeconomics, we'll be using AS and AD analysis to look at what happens when a country takes on debt. Now imagine a country enjoying full employment and a reasonable level of inflation, all is well, and then the state proposes to increase government expenditure. Now, from basic economics, what we're taught is that when G increases, there will be a shift in AD to the right, causing a growth in the economy from Y1 to Y2, closing an unemployment gap or reducing unemployment, and perhaps causing some rise in prices to some extent or other. So there's an initial stimulus to AD. But what we're not often taught, or what we forget to go through, is where the heck did that money come from? Now, there are three possibilities. The government could raise taxes to pay for it, the government could borrow money, or the government could print money. Now, we're initially going to look at what happens if the stimulus is financed by taxes. Then we're going to have a look at borrowing, and unfortunately for this one, because we've only got a few minutes, we're not going to have a look at what happens if the government prints money instead. So, what happens if it comes from taxes? Well, all that's done is shift money from one part of the economy to another. There is no overall increase in AD. I would suggest that the multiplier effect is ignored here, because all we're taking is money from one part of the economy, from some people, and giving it to others, which can have deleterious effects at the micro level. There may be some benefits, there may be some negatives, but overall we're going to assume it's quite neutral when you take money from one part to another. So the politicians dream of being able to finance economic growth through spending more money, but by raising taxes and balancing the budget, just sort of evaporates in front of our eyes. So what happens if the government were to borrow money instead? Well, one potential effect is for AD to shift to the right, but because taxation doesn't have to rise as much as it would with a balanced budget, this could cause an increase in economic growth from Y1 to Y2, with a concurrent increase in prices from P1 to P2. But how much prices rise, this is always a question when you start AD shifting to the right, depends on the nature of the supply curve. In this one that I've drawn, prices rise much more than the growth that we're getting, so it's more of an inflationary stimulus to the economy. Whereas if I draw a slightly different AS curve, then in this case growth occurs from Y1 to Y2, but prices don't rise as much because there's more elasticity involved in the economy from Y1 to Y2. So far so good. But then the loan has to be repaid, which then causes AD to drop back to the left. So is the economy any further forward from when it first started borrowing? Well, it depends on what the money was spent on. Now we're keeping this simple, and there's going to be raging arguments about how governments should spend money and how they do spend money, and also what the effects at the micro and macro level are of that expenditure, of course. But let's just keep things simple. Now, if you're going to be investing in the infrastructure, what we call supply side economics policies, then that's likely to cause AS to shift to the right. Now, this causes prices to fall and creates economic growth from Y2 to Y3. Now, this can be sustainable economic growth, and that would be a good thing if you've borrowed money, invested it, and you're reaping higher tax revenues from a growing economy to pay that loan off either quicker or on time or without any crisis occurring whatsoever. But on the other hand, and I'm going to pick on an area, if it merely pays public sector salaries, then we might not be looking at such a beneficial effect or result. AD will shift to the right, more money is being spent by civil servants, etc., or it doesn't matter where we put the money. It could be the military, it could be hospitals, it could be teachers. Money's now circulating in the economy that didn't before, so there is an inflationary boom, but then it goes back down when the loan is paid off, because it has been non-productive for the most part. Again, controversies here at the micro level, but non-productive expenditure. It's not been an investment, it's just been a period of consuming more, buying more stuff, rather than actually increasing productivity in the economy. So demand drops back down to where it was again. Now, this can cause, once aggregate demand starts to fall, This could cause unemployment to rise, of course, and then AD would drop perhaps even further to the left. Now, AS could also shift to the left if we're looking at a really bad situation here. If the increase in government expenditures increased government departments and their regulations and their interventions in the economy, and productivity starts to decline overall, we may see a shift in AS to the left, which would lead the economy actually dropping from Y1 to Y2 with a higher unemployment and higher inflation. So, here's a simple summary. If there's increased borrowing and taxes rise less than that borrowing, then government expenditure can increase. There will be net government expenditures, and hence AD can shift to the right. But then, what is that money spent on? If it's spent on non-productive activities, so imagine borrowing money on a credit card and you just go and spend it on food and clothing and it doesn't add anything to your wealth, then there's no growth in your net assets, there's no growth in your income potential. So with the economy, there'll be no economic growth. Now when the loan is paid back, arguably government expenditures must then decline, people are then laid off, and perhaps AD would fall and you might shift to the left, further left from where it began. On the other hand, if that extra government expenditure is put into productive activities, or those which help the private sector flourish, and the private sector is the wealth-creating organ or engine of the economy, then AD can certainly shift to the right and help AS also shift to the right as well. This is both beneficial in the sense that you've got higher expenditures and higher productivity across the economy. Economic growth can then be used to pay off the loan without serious effects on AD. But here's a political problem. Much money that is borrowed tends not to be for productive activities. A lot of it is paying for current expenditures, civil service expenses, etc. And also borrowing money tends to be apparently addictive. We find this with individuals. And the more that is borrowed, much of it doesn't really go into wealth creation, as we're saying, and this creates a problem for states running up higher and higher deficits. And if their economy then stalls, this can find themselves struggling to pay the interest due. And this is where the sovereign debt crisis may arise. Okay, well I hope that was useful. So a simplistic overview, there's much controversy that I've left out there of course. So good luck on your economics and we'll see you in another issue. Thanks very much for listening. Bye.